So this second part of the video, I'd like to talk about my own experiment slash adventure in treating my own room. So a little bit about me: I produce electronic music, and I do a bit of mixing, mostly my own stuff, but sometimes mixing for different projects. Um, and yeah, my room has presented a lot of issues over the time I've been in it. I love my room and I'm glad to be here, but sometimes, it's been a little wonky. So that's what led me to dive into this whole rabbit hole here. And so when I decided to undertake this adventure, the goal was to use broadband absorption panels strategically in my room, and also to build a diffusion panel, and very importantly, do it as cheaply as possible. So this is the before picture. I had basically gotten 6 Owens Corning 7034 4-inch panels from Amazon, and I just kind of thrown them around the room. This is when I was just getting started. And so the first thing I decided to do was to come up with a diagram of my room and plan where I wanted to have these panels placed. So I decided that I wanted to have them placed placed in points of early reflections from my listening position. So basically, in my room, as you just saw, the speakers are here, and the desk is here, and I'm sitting about here. So I wanted to make sure that these walls right here had treatment, and that the ceiling above was treated as well. There's windows here and here, and I get outside a lot, so I wasn't worried about covering them up with absorption, which I did do. And I also wanted a floating absorber, cloud absorber above my desk as well, to knock out the ceiling reflections. Also, I often have artists I'm working with sitting in the back while I'm working on a sofa, and so I wanted to try and clean up that area as well as much as, and so I wanted to clean up that area as much as I could as well. So I placed absorption here, and also on the door here, and I hung some floating absorbers from the ceiling here as well. And also, low frequencies tend to build up in corners, and I didn't really get into building a bass absorber yet, but I at least tried to do something about that by placing absorption in corners. So I have some absorption. So wherever there was corners in the room, I did my best to place some absorptions. So wherever there was corners in the room, I did my best to place some absorption there as well. So you might be wondering where I'm going with Albert Camus' book in paper. And basically I was designing these encasements, cloth encasements for the absorption, for the absorbers, encasements for the absorbers I was designing. And so these absorbers are 4-inch in depth, 48 inches in height, and then 24 inches across. And so what I wanted to do was have enclose them in material and have these tabs with D-rings attached, so that I could hang them from walls and the ceiling. And so in this picture here, you can see that I've in a sense designed this cloth encasement, and what I used was broadcloth, and I'll give you the links in a little bit for where I got this broadcloth. But you want a fabric that's breathable, basically. So you want sound to be able to penetrate the fabric without any reflection and be absorbed by the material, the fiberglass insulation that's inside the encasement. So I used broadcloth, and the idea was that I needed some extra material, these 3 inches here, to go along the side of the absorber. And so what we did, we being my mom and I, thank you so much, Mom, and we spent like 2 days straight sewing, I think maybe 28 of these encasements. So she was amazingly patient and supportive. So basically, we have some extra material on the sides here, so that it can wrap fully around this the acoustic absorption panel. So I want to take a second to get in some more depth how exactly these cloth encasements were designed and made. I've had them, I guess, up for 2 going on 3 years right now, and they're definitely sturdy and working great. I would make them all over again, so I wanted to go into a little bit more depth in case anyone wants to take this pattern and make their own treatment with it. So in this picture here, I've basically outlined the dimensions needed to create the cloth encasement. So we're working with 4-inch Owens Corning 703, which is 4 feet high, 48 inches, 2 feet wide, 24 inches, and 4 inches deep, 4 inches right here. So we also, when we sew the sides, we need a little bit of extra fabric. So I've made this 3 inches instead of just 2 inches. Same with here, 3 inches, 3 inches. So the general idea is that you leave one end open at the top to insert the acoustic treatment. So basically you would sew along maybe the bottom and one side and then leave the top open. So one thing that was kind of key with getting the corners right is I'm not going to get into it in this video, but on YouTube just look up sewing boxed corners, just sewing boxed corners, and you'll find out how to do that. The short version is that to make the encasement snug around the corner, you have to kind of sew this corner and then kind of like sort of like flip it 90 degrees on itself, and then kind of sew a triangle end and then cut it off. That's the gist of it. So this diagram is basically a pattern that you would need to take this design and cut out from a broadcloth roll as many of these encasements as you would need. So how we got to these numbers right here, so just to kind of be explicit, so this right here would be one piece of cloth needed for an encasement. This would be another right here. And the broadcloth roll I got was 60 inches wide, which is a really, really good width because it's, pretty close to the exact dimensions that we need for the encasements. So the 54 inches here, how did we get that number? So it's basically 48 plus 3 plus 3. And then how did we get the 58. That's basically 24 plus 4 plus 24 plus 3, and then the 3. Okay, so that's how we got at these dimensions. So you could basically, take a broadcloth roll and then make as many of these encasements as you would want. We needed a way, of course, to hang up the absorbers on the wall once they were finished. So the idea was to create these little straps or tabs. It's basically a piece of, actually let me forward here, it's basically just a piece of broadcloth with a D-ring going through it. So the idea was to take a piece of broadcloth, and it's actually folded a few times, so there's not any of the none of the hem is actually sticking out. It's actually sewn inside of the tab or strap itself. And then so they're about 2 inches wide. We got 2-inch wide D-rings, and the important thing is that you actually sew them into the seam of the encasement when you're sewing the encasement together, because it's the seam of the encasement that holds in the tab. And we did 2 tabs for each side of the absorber. So you can see there's one here, and then on the other side there's also one on the top and then one on the bottom. So I don't have a diagram or a picture of this, but one thing that was very challenging in finishing this project was actually getting the Owens Corning fiberglass inside the encasement, and it took me a while to figure out how to do this properly, but I want to describe how it was done. The idea is to take 2 pieces of cardboard that are the exact size of the Owens Corning 703, so 2 feet by 4 feet, and 2 of those pieces of cardboard. So you put them on the top and bottom of one of the fiberglass slabs before you try and get it into the encasement. And then what you do is offset the Owens Corning 703 about 1 foot so that there's the cardboard for about 1 foot doesn't have any Owens Corning in between it. And then you kind of push those pieces of cardboard together to sort of form an arrow point or a tip. And then you put that tip first into the opening of the cloth encasement. And that's sort of like your spearhead. And then I think from here, if you're doing it, you would sort of get the idea how it works. You kind of use the pieces of cardboard as a almost like a needle, and the fiberglass is like the thread. They kind of go into the encasement first, and because of that, you're able to kind of slide in the fiberglass in between the cardboard as you continually push the cardboard deeper and deeper into the encasement. So that's a pretty involved description of how these were made. So sorry that the diagrams are a bit lacking, and I don't have any actual video of the process. I did it over 2 years ago, and it was done in between a bunch of other projects I was involved in, and I just wanted to do it ASAP, get it done with, so I could just get to the music and mix and produce music. So so sorry there's not really much documentation of this process, but hopefully this verbal explanation will give anyone who would want to attempt to do this on their own the information they need to actually make it happen. This is us sewing it together. Thanks so much, Mom. This is when I got all of the panels, and this is the end result. So you can see there's the tabs here to attach the D-rings to hang the absorption from the walls. And in the end, I just used some staples to staple the top shut. But if I did this again, I would probably create a drawstring system. So I would sew the drawstring into this top area of the enclosure, and then basically once the panel is inside, just pull the drawstring and tie it shut. That would be a little bit more, I think, elegant than the staples, but the staples work too. And for some of these, I have a longer strap that goes around it to hang from the ceiling. Now, I could have probably used just these, but this is my first time. This is my first time designing this, and I thought the strap might be a little bit stronger for the ones that were hanging from the ceiling. So I made a strap for some of them as well. And this is the end result. So you can see I have the cloud absorbers hanging above the desk, and ones over here and here. So, all of these ones basically knock out these early reflections, and some in the back to knock out reflections for the sofa in the back. And actually, one really cool byproduct was that it's kind of hard to see, but in this part of the room, kind of under the star area, you can place a microphone and maybe in the middle of the room, and you can actually record musicians or singers, and it sounds really, really great because all of the sound, there's no direct reflections at that particular point in the room. They're all knocked out by these absorbers. And so after I got the absorbers built, I decided I wanted to build a diffuser. And so I got some wood bought and cut, and I basically got a plan, DIY plan from Acoustic Fields, and it was, I believe, the quadratic 17 diffuser. I had to modify it slightly because I didn't have the resources, patience, or knowledge to cut the dados they had included in the plan, but I modified it slightly. It's not quite as good as the one that they had intended to be built in the plan, but I think it works, totally fine. So this is building it. It's definitely an interesting challenge building these things in a small New York City apartment, but you do what you gotta do. And this is a link down here to the left for the plans on Acoustic Fields website, and the completed diffuser is on the right there. And there it is, placed in the back of my room, and it was really cool to set it up in the room. It just adds a really nice live sound. It's hard to describe, but the room sounds airy. It sounds open. It doesn't sound overly absorbative, but it makes the room sound bigger in an interesting way. And I definitely found it to be a nice improvement when I got it built. So this is the price list along with links. And again, this document will be in the description below. And you can see that, if you were to compare the cost of this total with actually buying pre-made absorbers and diffusers online, this is definitely way, way cheaper. Yeah. And so basically this is my room before the treatment. This was made using Room EQ Wizard, and you can see there's some deep cuts and boosts along with some kind of significant resonances in the room. And this was after the treatment. You can see that particular resonance is gone, and there still are boosts and cuts because I think I also need to install a bass absorber, but it's a bit more tamed. Um, of course, there's the visual aspect, but you could definitely hear it. The room was definitely kind of like wrangled into shape a bit by all this absorption. And I didn't mention it before, but the last step that I find really helpful in optimizing a listening space is digital room correction software. And so I use SonarWorks, and this is the waterfall chart with the absorption, diffusion, and SonarWorks in my room. So you can see that from where I started off to where I ended up, it really came together, I feel, in a nice way. And in conclusion, not only does the chart look nice, but in terms of actually mixing and producing my music and being able to hear back and have my work translate, definitely the goal was accomplished. I really feel that in my space I can make music confidently and know that when I play it somewhere else, it's going to sound exactly how I had intended it to while I was producing it in my studio. And that was really the goal of this whole project, was to accomplish that and do it in a cost-effective way. Thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in and checking out this second part of this video on creating acoustic treatment, absorption, and diffusion. I know it was a long 2-part video. I did not intend it to be this long, but sometimes you get into it and there's a lot more details than you remember there to be. So anyway, if anything can be clarified in the kind of blow-by-blow instructions of how I created this absorption, please drop me a line, put a comment below, and I'll do my best to clarify. Again, it's been a really game changer for me in terms of making my own music. It's kind of like my glasses went through the car wash after going dirt biking or something. So it's a good thing. So yeah, anyway, best of luck to all of you out there. I'm sure you're gonna make amazing music, and